the Deputy Attorney General. And the chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gaetz, for 5 minutes.
Was Peter Strzok the author, recipient, carbon copy, blind carbon copy on any documents relating to the meeting between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton on the Arizona tarmac?
I do not know the answer to that.
Will all of the documents relating to that tarmac meeting be produced in an unredacted format?
Congressman, the Inspector General is handling that investigation, and as I said, we're going to try to accommodate any congressional requests that we can, but I'll have to consult with them before I do.
So if the president declassified the documents, how quickly could they be produced?
If documents are declassified, they could be produced fairly quickly.
Is that like within a week?
Well, it would depend upon the sensitivity of the document. I can't answer.
If they were declassified, I guess they wouldn't be sensitive anymore. So, I mean, could we get them within a week?
Which documents are we talking about,
The documents relating to the tarmac.
Oh, well, I don't know if I don't know if they're classified. I don't know.
No, assuming they're
anything about
declassified. How quickly would it take to get them from you to us if the president declassified them?
If there are documents that's appropriate to disclose, then we disclose them as quickly as we could.
When did Justice first learn that Nellie Orr was employed by Fusion GPS?
I do not know the precise date, Congressman.
Can you find that out and get it to us?
Well, if we know it, yes.
Well, we got to find that out, right? I mean,
Yes.
you've got the wife of someone who was one of the top counterintelligence officials in the Department of Justice working for the company that was a pass-through for money from the Democratic committee to Russians to get dirt on the president to discredit him both before and after the election. I feel like it should be a pretty high priority to figure out when that occurred, right?
I don't want to quibble with you except to say that Mr. Orr is not a counterintelligence official, but yes, I agree with you. In fact, I believe Mr. Orr is scheduled to testify before one of the committees, or at least to be interviewed next week.
Right, but that doesn't absolve us of the obligation to actually go and find out when his wife started working for these people that wrote this salacious and unverified dossier. So when did the Department of Justice learn of Bruce Orr's contact with Christopher Steele during the 2016 campaign?
Congressman, I'm reluctant to answer that only because I don't know all the information, and I want to make sure we know all the information before we give any answers.
We too want to know all the information. That's why we keep asking these questions. I mean, again, you've got this person who works at the Department of Justice, whose wife is working for Fusion GPS, and during the campaign, he's meeting with the author of a dossier that Mr. Comey called salacious and unverified. And so I would hope that it would be a top priority to figure out when we first came to know of those meetings. Is that something you can get to the committee?
If we get all the information and we have a firm answer, I don't want to answer any questions until I know all the details.
When did the Department of Justice first learn of Bruce Orr's contact with Fusion with Glenn Simpson after the election?
Congressman, we have agreed to provide all the relevant documentation to the Intelligence Committee. I haven't seen it all, so I'm not in position to answer it.
So during Mr. Shavitz's questioning, he pretty thoroughly laid out the number of people on Mr. Mueller's team who have financial donations to Democrats, the Clinton-Obama campaigns. I mean, I think over half of the Mueller team donated to either Clinton or Obama. None of them donated to Trump. And so that's either one of two things. Either Mr. Mueller was curating a universe of people who hate the president, or it's just one hell of a coincidence that a whole lot of people had demonstrable bias that we learn more and more about each day. And so you've answered that question by saying, look, people have personal opinions, but that doesn't always influence action. And it's the action that is your responsibility to make sure is not infected by this bias.
Correct.
And I would proffer that, like, when Mr. Strzok goes and changes wording from gross negligence, a crime, to extremely careless, that's not a belief, that's an action. Like, if we can't find out, you won't tell us whether or not taxpayer money was used to go and buy this dossier. If it was, if the FBI was working with the Democratic Party to buy a dossier to discredit the President of the United States, that's not a belief, that's an action. If that dossier was dressed up as an intelligence document and brought to a FISA court, that wasn't a belief, that was an action. If Bruce Orr is meeting with the author of the dossier during the campaign and the head of Fusion GPS after the campaign, and as you sit here today, you can't tell us when that occurred, those meetings aren't beliefs, they're actions that undermine the credibility of this investigation. And I would certainly suggest that when Mr. Weissman, Mueller's number 2 in this probe, sends an email on his official Department of Justice email to Sally Yates praising her for defying the President of the United States, that's not a belief, that's an action. So my question to you is, like, what do we ultimately have, what do you have to see in terms of the actions of people with demonstrated bias against the President of the United States before you will appoint a special counsel to investigate the clear bias that has infected this investigation?
Well, Congressman, there are a number of different issues that you've raised. With regard to the allegations of bias, as I've explained, our Inspector General is conducting a very thorough review of that. He's the one who identified the text messages. And so I'm confident that's going to be done appropriately. We're going to
Mueller didn't, right? It took the Inspector General doing it. Mr. Mueller didn't find this information.
Well, I don't, Mr. Mueller found it when somebody told him about it, but it was in the text messages, which the IG got access to.
It really makes you wonder how all these people that we're finding all this information about, with all these connections, ended up on his team. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify, though, I do want to make clear with
Gentleman may answer.
Thank you, sir. With regard to oversight, we are working with the Intelligence Committee to try to provide them all the information they need to answer some of those questions. And I don't personally know the answers, but I'm confident that we'll be able to get that information to them.
Well, thank you, but I just want to note here, and I'll take the time right now, I was going to say something at the end, but two things. First of all, the House Judiciary Committee, not the Intelligence Committee, has direct oversight responsibility over the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have, the overwhelming majority of the majority, called for the appointment of a second special counsel to investigate all of this. And I think if that were taking place, that might satisfy a number of us. However, it's not. And even based upon prior conversations that I've had with you, you're aware of this, and you've noted that we certainly have the right and the responsibility to do that oversight. When you talk about providing documents to the Intelligence Committee, I have no problem with your doing that, but all of that information should be made available to this committee as well. Secondly, the Inspector General, his investigation is very important. We support that. It is very encouraging to us that he is doing what I think is good, unbiased work, and we want that to continue. But our investigation does not need to. You may wait for them to draw conclusions, but our investigation does not need to wait on the Inspector General. So again, I thank you for the documents that were provided to us yesterday. There are, as you know, many, many, many more, I think 1.2 million documents that the Inspector General has, and we have a commitment from the Assistant Attorney General, Mr. Boyd, to provide those by January 15. We have asked, we've sent a letter asking for certain information and commitments regarded to that January 15 production date, but that is very important for us, and we do not intend to wait on the Inspector General's report, whenever that may be, maybe before then, maybe after then, to pursue the investigation that this committee is pursuing. So as long as we have that understanding and that you live by the commitment that has already been made to be fulsome in your production of documents, I have no problem what you provide to the Intelligence Committee, but don't look at it as something just provided them. It should be provided to this committee. If it needs to be handled in camera, if it needs to be handled in a classified manner, we have the facilities, and we are certainly prepared to make the necessary commitments to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate, if I may further explain, I have instructed our staff to make sure they do make this information available to you as well, and my understanding is that they're seeking to make arrangements with your staff to do so this month.
Thank you very much. The chair will definitely take them under advisement. I do want to thank the Deputy Attorney General for his participation today. I do have a couple more questions. Did former Director Comey, in sharing his memos with another individual who then shared them with a New York Times reporter, share classified information?
Congressman, I do not know the answer to that, but the Inspector General of our department has jurisdiction to review that issue.
And are you aware of the report indicating that Jim Baker, the General Counsel of the FBI, was under investigation by the FBI for sharing classified information?
I believe that I read the media account that you're referring to.
Do you still have confidence in the FBI General Counsel?
I have confidence in the FBI, and I have confidence, Mr. Chairman, that Director Wray will make appropriate decisions with regard to his staff.
And finally, in an interview with NBC's Scott MacFarlane on December 6th, you indicated that you were satisfied with how the special counsel's investigation is proceeding. Why, after you've heard all the concerns expressed here today, why are you satisfied with the course of the investigation so far?
I'm satisfied, Congressman, because based upon what I know, which is different from what accounts may appear in the media, based upon what I know, I believe Director Mueller is appropriately remaining within his scope and conducting himself appropriately. And in the event that there is any credible allegation of misconduct by anybody in his staff, that he's taking appropriate action.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will have, I have no doubt, from both sides of the aisle, additional questions in writing, and we hope that you're able to answer those and answer them expeditiously. Again, I thank you. You're a little bit ahead, not much, but a little bit ahead of Director Ray's time, and I know the sacrifice it is to prepare for this and then to give us a better part of a day to answer these questions. But they're very important. The FBI is an incredibly important law enforcement organization. In my opinion, it's still the premier law enforcement organization in the world. Again, as I said earlier, there are tens of thousands of employees there who are very dedicated to doing the right thing, upholding the rule of law, and providing justice in the fashion that the blindfolded woman with balanced scales stands for. I think the department stands for that. But I do think at the higher levels of the department, there are some serious problems. The gentleman from Florida asked some questions very much related to this. And I think that while we all have confidence in Director Ray, we also believe that there need to be some changes made, both in terms of the personnel, in terms of the protocols that are followed, and certainly in terms of getting the necessary information to this committee and whatever other appropriate committees so that all of this can be aired and the public's understanding that these problems are being solved and that they know what the nature of them are. So again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your work in a very difficult situation as Deputy Attorney General of the United States under these circumstances.
Thank you.
And with that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witness and additional materials for the record, and the hearing is adjourned.